Labour union leaders arriving for this crucial meeting with the government. They're here to debate an issue that's raised concerns over the past week: the removal of subsidy and the resultant increase in price of fuel. Over the weekend, the leadership of Labour had issued the government a 96-hour ultimatum to revert to the old price or face a nationwide strike and protests. That ultimatum ends at midnight Tuesday. But not all arms of the union are in consonance with the position of a mass action. Workers in the financial institutions, electricity, rail and oil sectors are backing out of the strike.
I'm happy to announce that Nupen, Nue, Nubufe, and the Railway Union have dissociated themselves from the strike, from the proposed strike, the ultimatum of which we received for Wednesday. The government of the Federal Republic of Nigeria wishes to express its profound gratitude and understanding and maturity of these unions for having been brave and bold enough to support the position of the government.
I told you that action of Wednesday or whatever is not, we are not part of it. The action of Wednesday, that if we are to take action, we need some time to mobilize and sensitize our people.
The unions backing out of the planned protests are some of the strongest and most influential. Without their support, it would mean all banks, fuel stations and depots, as well as power companies, would remain open for business. However, arguments from the Nigeria Labour Congress continues to center around the sustainability of a policy that would increase the suffering of a people. Monday's meeting went deep into the night and ended in a deadlock, and further negotiations are underway. The government had been spending billions of dollars on fuel subsidies, but the economy has been severely battered by falling crude oil prices. About 60% of government's revenue has been lost as such, and the government says it does not have money to spend on subsidies. Even though fuel subsidy scheme is quite popular here, many economists have been making arguments against it. In fact, some think the removal is overdue, but to the average Nigerian, subsidy is one way they can have a share of the country's vast oil wealth, and it's not clear whether the unionists would heed the industrial court order. Kelechi Emekalam, CCTV Abuja, Nigeria.
Deji Badmus is joining us in Lagos with an update on that situation. Deji, welcome to the show. Now, of course, with this strike meant to take place tomorrow, what is the update on talks between, of course, the unions and a government? What can we expect to happen tomorrow morning?
Well, Uche, it appears we might be heading for, the labor unions now might just make good their threat to go on strike. Of course, the industrial court issued an order restraining them from proceeding on the strike tomorrow. But from what we're gathering now, it's like the unions will disobey that court order and begin the strike tomorrow. We just have to wait and see. What we understand at the moment is that the unions the union members now, the union leadership was supposed to meet with a team from the federal government. That meeting, we understand, as at 6 p.m. had not taken place because the union members had still not shown up. We understand they are not happy that that court order came. So there's every likelihood that they may defy that court order and go on the strike action. I mean, it has happened in the past anyway. In 2011, there was a similar order from the same court, but the unions disobeyed that court order and went on strike. So I think we might have the strike, but whether the strike will be effective, it's a different ballgame altogether, Uche.
Well, Deji, I mean, as we saw there, not all unions are behind tomorrow's strike. Now, what is your take on views that it's more likely that we will not see protests similar to what we saw in 2012 during the Occupy Nigeria protests?
Well, I really don't think we're going to see anything at all, in the scale of what we saw in 2012. Quite a lot of people, I must confess, are not in support of the strike. Quite a lot of people have been calling on the labor union leaders to shelve the idea completely. And you know what? The fact that there is a division within the union also tells a lot. If for a strike to actually be very effective, to be candid, you need the unions in the oil sector. I'm talking about Nupenga and Pengason. Now they've made it clear that they're not going to be part of that strike. Then something else you should understand, Uche, the NLC itself is divided. I'm talking about the Nigeria Labour Congress. It is divided. You have two factions of the NLC. So the faction that is saying it is going on strike is the one that is based in Abuja. But there's another one based in Lagos, headed by a different person. That group says it is not favorably disposed to any strike action at all, and that it would not be going on strike. So, and you look around, especially here in Lagos, you don't have any sign at all. There's no sense of panic. You don't have people buying things or stockpiling on food out of panic or anything like that. Now, are we likely going to see a protest tomorrow? Well, we may see some kind of protest, but it's definitely not going to be in the scale that we saw in 2012 when, you know, thousands of people literally gathered around somewhere here in Lagos and protested for several days before it all ended.
Well, Deji, we know, Nigeria is facing many issues in the oil sector right now. We know the NNPC head, Kachiku, he says that Nigeria's output has fallen to lows the country has not seen since 1989. Now, with a budget based on 2.2 million barrels a day, what is the way forward, and how are we going to see policy being affected going forward?
There's no question at all that if something is not done to stop the violence and, the attack on oil installations in the Niger Delta region, it will be very difficult for this government, for instance, to implement its budget. The budget is actually predicated on a production level of 2.2 million barrels per day, and now we're doing something around 1.4, so we're losing 800,000 barrels per day. That's what the Minister of State for Petroleum said. Now, that is a lot, because this 1.4 we're talking about, Uche, the 1.4 does not actually come to the country as a whole. There is what is called the joint venture partnership between the Nigerian government and the IOCs, that's the international oil companies now. So, and it's a 50-50 partnership. So what is actually coming to the government is far less than, the 1.4 we're talking about. So it's a very dicey situation. Of course, the government has the option to look at the area of taxes. It intends to broaden the tax base. But fact is that workers have not been paid for several months now. So who actually are you going to tax? And how much will the government be able to raise when it comes to tax? So the government might really need to open some kind of dialogue, if you ask me, with these militants in the Niger Delta region, so that these attacks could stop. Because if the attacks don't actually stop, Uche, it will be very, very difficult for this government to be able to implement its budget. We might see the deficit, the budget deficit increase, and the government might have to resort to borrowing more to finance the budget, and that surely would not be a good story at all for Nigeria. At the moment, it's a very tough one for this country, Uche.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Deji, for those insights. Deji Badmus joining us in Lagos. Now